in 1956. Remember, he was world champion 5 times with 4 different teams. Mike Hawthorne, Phil Hill and John Surtees also won titles for Ferrari in the 50s and 60s, and the cars back then were beautiful, and they even sounded great, didn't they? 5 in the iconic 312T. Throughout much of the 80s and 90s, though, Ferrari looked like they'd never go all the way again. Le Professeur Alain Prost came pretty close in 1990, but lost out to his bitter rival and former teammate at McLaren, Ayrton Senna. It was only when John Todt recruited a swathe of staff from outside of Italy, including Michael Schumacher, that the glory days returned 21 years after their last driver's title. The turn of the century saw the prancing horse sprint to an unprecedented 5 consecutive championship doubles. And after Schumacher left, Kimi Raikkonen reclaimed the driver's title immediately. But despite employing 1,500 people, the Iceman remains the last Ferrari world champion. So, 16 constructors' titles, 7 more than McLaren, and 15 drivers' titles, 4 more than, again, McLaren. Ferrari are truly Formula One's top team. Forza Ferrari.
Edition of Trans-Europe Express. Still got the 3 hours for you. Delighted to say I'm Danny Kelly. Well, I am Danny Kelly, and I'm delighted to say that Andy Brassell will be here with us as well. That's what makes the show great. We've got an absolute corker for you tonight. There's just so much going on. We'll have all the major stories from around the continent, obviously, including that breaking news that Nicholas Jackson, playing the part of Peter Odemwingie, is slinking away perhaps from Munich as we speak. We'll be talking to our Turkish football expert Çetin Cem Yilmaz about not just Mourinho but also Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, sacked within 24 hours of each other and within 3 games at the start of the season. We'll get all the reaction to the draws for the Champions League, the Europa League and the Europa Conference League. Tim Vickery will join us from South America. Daniele Fisichella will join us to talk about the next chapter in the incredible journey of Jamie Vardy and much else besides. Listen, thank you all for joining us. It should be a belting show. Welcome one, welcome all to Trans-Europe Express. Andy, we'll get Çetin up in just a second. What is the very, very, very latest on Nicholas Jackson?
Well, do you know what? Before we get to that, I'm sticking my arm in there because we've still got some football going on, Danny. And
right.
Rayo Vallecano have just equalised against Barcelona at Vallecas. 68 minutes. Wow. Fran Perez, who they've just signed from Valencia, he was unmarked, all alone at the back post, but still it was a brilliant finish with his right foot. Smashed it in. Lamine Yamal had given them the lead with a kind of dubious-looking penalty in the first half that he himself earned. And I do mean earned. He didn't fake it in any way. I just didn't think it was a penalty. Marcus Rashford came on about 10 minutes ago for his latest appearance for Barcelona. He came on for Rafinha, but not the desired effect for the moment. So Rayo won, Barcelona won as stands. Remember, Real Madrid have won 3 out of 3 so far.
So we've been watching the security cameras at various airports in Bavaria. What's the latest on Nicholas Jackson?
100% off is being reported by Sky Germany. So, of course, as you said, there was the Odemwingie style sit-in in Munich this weekend when he was recalled following the injury to Liam Delap for Chelsea. He and his agent refused to go, it appears. I'm not saying that a weekend in Munich is nicer than a weekend in Shepherd's Bush, but it might be. It could be. And certainly Nicholas Jackson took
Why would he be
approach.
in Shepherd's Bush? He doesn't play for Rangers, does he?
No, but Peter Odemwingie wasn't he? When he
of course, absolutely. Sorry, you're continuing that. Okay, right. Sorry.
Sorry, I'm not letting it die. I'm not letting it die. Not yet. No, anyway. And of course, we know he was lined up for a loan and a permanent signing next year, but it looks like that's not happening either. So,
Wow.
despite the attempts to on all sides to sort of force it through, it doesn't look like it's happening.
Okay, let's turn then to the enormous story coming out of the southeasterly part of Europe. In a space of 48 hours this week, we've seen Jose Mourinho sacked by Fenerbahce and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer sacked by Besiktas. We've barely started the Turkish football season. The transfer window stays open for another 2 weeks there. Yet both of these gentlemen, well known to fans of Manchester United, indeed, of course, Premier League legends in their own different ways, are gone. Huge story. Therefore, we need to be joined by someone who knows the Turkish league inside out. So it's a very big good evening to Çetin Cem Yilmaz. Hello, Çetin.
Hello.
First of all, should we be at all surprised? I'm not going to lie. I am surprised because it's so early in the season. How shocking is this with both of these gone in the space of a day together?
Yes, you said 48 hours, but I think it was like closer to 12 hours. It was such a, shocking day. I mean, for Besiktas, it was like, you could have seen this coming. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. I think there was, even from day one, some part of the club never felt right with him. I think there were so many fans that were looking for someone like Sergen Yalçın, who was appointed yesterday, or Şenol Güneş, who led the club to 2 titles. They were wanting someone from the club history to come on. So I think that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer always had an uphill battle. So it was a matter of time. But with Jose Mourinho, it was a huge shock, especially the way that, it's not even September. It's like the end of August, and, Fenerbahce has fallen into chaos, like, so early in the season. So I think the Fenerbahce part is a bit more surprising because, also the club chairman Ali Koç will be tested. There is also a club chairman election coming up in late September. So there is now chaos. There was also talk that it could have been better if he has at least waited for the election to turn out. And funnily enough, Fenerbahce are being linked to 3 players this weekend. They are close to signing Asensio and Ederson from Man City, and also they signed Turkish international Kerem Aktürkoğlu, all within the same day or like the same weekend after losing to Benfica in the Champions League playoffs and also sacking Jose Mourinho. So that's quite surprising, actually, how it turns out.
I mean, as you say, the Mourinho one was less expected, even if both Mourinho and Solskjaer's firings were sort of linked to their European fates. I mean, it was such a strange way that it turned out for Fenerbahce, because, as you say, Kerem Aktürkoğlu scores the winner for Benfica that knocks his future club out of the Champions League, costing them
Incredible.
Costing them a fortune twice in the same week, because of course they have to spend 25 million to buy him as well. But of course he knew it was happening, because he normally does his little Harry Potter celebration. He didn't, so it's clear that it's clear that he knew they were going, Çetin. But what I wanted to ask you is how much of the manner of the way that they went out, Fenerbahce, affected this firing of Jose Mourinho? Because I've heard Fenerbahce fans who go to the game say, well, look, okay, he makes Fenerbahce big news around the world outside Turkey, but on the other hand, we don't play like we want to win with any bravery in the biggest games, which is a big thing, obviously, in Turkish football. And they had one shot on target, even after all the money they've spent in Lisbon. Benfica had a couple of goals disallowed. It really could have been 3 or 4. How much of it was about not just the fact that Fenerbahce went out of the Champions League, but the way they went out of the Champions League?
That's a great point, because it has definitely played a part, because you can lose to Benfica. It's not the end of the world. Benfica is a Champions League regular, and Fenerbahce are a team that is progressing. They made good runs in the Conference League 2 years earlier, and then Europa League. So Jose Mourinho kind of tried to bring down the expectations, but the way that he did, like on the build-up to the game, he announced that Benfica are the favorites. He actually said that Fenerbahce are actually a Europa League team. So this really didn't sit well with Fenerbahce fans. And he also criticized the board openly for not replacing the players. Fenerbahce lost 6 key players last year, including Edin Dzeko and Dusan Tadic, who were really influential. Obviously, Fenerbahce signed 2 important players, but the squad was still in progress. And Jose Mourinho criticized this openly. And, that didn't do him any favors within the board. And as you said, Fenerbahce fans really did not enjoy the way team has played. It was not only the European games, but also in big games against Galatasaray and Beşiktaş. The play was always so reactive. It was so cautious. As you said, Fenerbahce finished the 180 minutes with just 1 shot on target. And playing at home, Benfica was down to 10 men in the last 20 minutes of the game, and Fenerbahce didn't quite show any reaction. The way that Fenerbahce was playing like a really cautious version of a 3-4-3, they all, didn't do any favors for Fenerbahce. I think that if Jose Mourinho managed to play an exciting team, I mean, he's not famous for this one, but at least he used to be a winner. But with Fenerbahce, he never did that in big games and in Europe. Last year, they lost to Rangers, if you remember. So he never could have made a, impressive run like his predecessor, Ismail Kartal, who is now seen as a club legend. He's like a really, really loyal servant of the club. And he is now expected to take over right now because it will be his 4th term at the club. He has never won silverware, but he is known for, steering the sheep in dark times. So,
Chetin, let me just jump in there because we're going to have a lot of this tonight. We've already told you about Nicholas Jackson's move to Bayern Munich. Over, kaput, it's off. Fabrizio Romano, who else, is reporting that Adrian Rabiot, deal done to go to AC Milan. £10 million package, which of course reunites him yet again with Max Allegri. Just thought we'd get that in there, Andy. Look, Mourinho is the big name. Very briefly, Chetin, I guess Solskjaer, less of a surprise. As you say, some people were never quite comfortable with him there. And although he beat both Fenerbahce and Galatasaray in his debut season as a manager, this just never seemed like a good fit for me.
True. Yeah. I mean, with some fans of Beşiktaş were really rooting for Ole, and he was always a good guy. He was talking about progress, good football, and there were glimpses of good football during his helm. But the start of the year, there is lots of deadwood within Beşiktaş squad, and Oxlade-Chamberlain is still a Beşiktaş player. So there are lots of new signings, but he had lots to do. But when you lose to Shakhtar Donetsk and Lausanne in like the same month, it doesn't look good for you.
Listen, thank you so much. Çetin Cem Yılmaz there with the very latest from Turkey. Andy, I suppose I should ask you, and it's always good to talk to Çetin, of course, what next for these two gents now?
I think for Mourinho, you're looking at who gets sacked from the Premier League in October, aren't you? I mean, that to me seems like the obvious move from here. That or Saudi, I think is going to come up next for him. There's not the vacancy in Portugal with the national team at the moment. With Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, it's quite difficult to tell. It was surprised to see him get appointed in the first place, and a lot of the backlash of this has not been like personal criticism of him, because of course it's remarkable that in the big games, I guess United fans will be familiar with this, he was able to do like really good jobs on big teams. They beat Beşiktaş. He's the first Beşiktaş coach to beat Fenerbahce and Galatasaray in his first season. I saw them, along with Lars Sivertsen, our friend, beat Athletic Bilbao in his first game in charge, and they looked really impressive. So he's great playing on the counter-attack. So maybe a smaller team suits him. I don't mean that in a patronising way, but maybe that's the logical conclusion of the way he likes to set up and his strengths.
OK, listen, thank you very much indeed for that. We're going to turn our attention next here on Trans Europe Express to football in Germany, where if you think that Mourinho and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer have had a very kind of short tenure at their clubs. Wait till we've got hear what we've got to say about Erik ten Hag, less than 2 months into his job at Leverkusen. That's coming up next year on Trends Europe Express. You listen to me, Danny Kelly, and him, Andy Brassell. Okay, Germany next, Andy, and look, I knew we'd be doing this all night. Obviously, at some stage, we'll get to talk about Nicholas Jackson, but Chelsea, the player trading club of the world now, it seems, it's not just Jackson who's on his way back to Stamford Bridge, someone else as well.
Yeah, Mark Guiu. It looks as if he's ending his loan spell with Sunderland, which has only just started, and going back there. I didn't know it was possible to bring him back in the first 6 months, to be honest, but that's what's happening. And look, we only saw a little bit of him in the Conference League last season, but when he originally came into the Barcelona side, it was clear that this is someone who's a really natural finisher. So it makes sense in that sense. But if you're bringing him back, why are you bringing Jackson back as well? Or is bringing Jackson back just a move to say, make us another offer on the final day? We'll have to wait and see.
Yes, one hopes it doesn't mean that Delap is actually more seriously injured than we thought. That would be really horrible, wouldn't it? So on Germany, our original headline here was, I mean, it's really cruel, and I'm going to say, you wrote it, Andy, Erik ten sacked, because we keep getting the stories out of Germany that Erik ten Hag, who's been there 2 months almost to the day, is now on the brink of being sacked by Bayer Leverkusen.
Yeah, so there was a lot of talk about it in Germany this week, and in the approach to the game against Werder Bremen yesterday, there was a feeling that already Ten Hag was under pressure to get a result in that game for a number of reasons. Now, we'll come to that in a second, but what happened with the game first? So they went to Werder Bremen, who are one of the weakest teams in the league, and I think could be in relegation trouble this season. Winning 3-1. They were a man up after a red card for Werder Bremen, and they managed to let it slip and concede a goal with pretty much the last kick of the game, which ends up making it a 3-3 draw. And after that, the reports are it's not when Ten Hag is going to be, it's not if Ten Hag is going to be sacked, but when. Which is extraordinary, really. So it's a feeling that already at the club, they're just deeply unimpressed with him, and there are doubts about him at all levels, really. So nothing will be announced immediately because they're going to have a very busy last day of the transfer window. So we've got Elis Ben-Seguir, who's just arrived from Monaco for £32 million. He will obviously go straight into the 11, you would think. A couple of other big players who are going to be arriving in the next day or so, of course, Piero Hincapié. One of the reasons that Ten Hag had his nose put out of joint a little bit, I think that Hincapié waved goodbye to the fans at full time at the Weserstadion yesterday, is going to be joining Arsenal. Now, at Leverkusen's request, as far as I understand, it's going to be a loan with Arsenal having an obligatory purchase option next summer. Is it an option if it's obligatory? I don't know.
No,
anyway, yeah, basically on the request of Leverkusen.
But Andy, you mentioned
they have already made like something like 240 million from selling players this summer.
Let's go through the list. Hincapié is going. Frimpong went. Florian Wirtz went. Granit Xhaka went. Radetzky, the captain, went. They lost Jonathan Tah. Admittedly, he was out of contract to Bayern Munich. What do they expect of Erik Ten Hag? They have literally sold the team out from under him.
Yeah, they have. And Granit Xhaka going, I think, was one that caused a bit of tension, certainly, because they'd already started pre-season poorly. And I guess there are two ways of looking at it. You know, does this mean that Ten Hag was fatally exposed, or did Xhaka and Radetzky want to go, the most experienced senior players, because they weren't feeling his work? I guess that's really got to be the question, and one that I don't think we'll ever know the answer to, as we're not them and we're not actually inside the dressing room. But it's clear that Leverkusen are a club that don't overreact to things. They're a very stable club. But it's been compared, actually, and especially with what Robert Andrich, who's one of the remaining very, very influential voices in the dressing room, of course, Germany midfielder, has been saying after the games, it has felt a little bit like they don't really feel that leadership is there, and they feel a little bit like they did in the back days of Gerardo Seoane before he went, and of course was replaced by Xabi Alonso. So it'd be interesting to see who they've got lined up next. But of course, it's not a case of, a lot of people might sit there and say, well, they've bought Malik Tillman, and of course come out of Dutch football, Ben-Seguir, other players. The fact is that he will have had very little input in that, Erik Ten Hag. It will be the club. It will be Fernando Caro. It will be Simon Rolfes, the sporting director. So it's not a case of the next coach, once the window is shut, having to work with Ten Hag's players, because there really are no Ten Hag players. There are just Leverkusen players, but they clearly don't believe in him anymore. And if he's not going to go now, it just feels like a matter of time.
Right. Imagine they did. I mean, obviously got the whole of the international break to deal with it now, but imagine if they let him go, say, tomorrow. That means that three former Manchester United managers have been gone in less than a week. Solskjaer, Mourinho and Ten Hag. No other club can match this. I mean, Manchester United volatility even after you've left the club. It's
basically the opposite of what you always say, Danny, about players leaving Spurs and winning trophies, isn't it?
It's reversing now. But yeah. Poor old man. I mean, it's just an extraordinary idea. They're going to get rid of him, though, unless they've got somebody really that they really, really want, love, desire, somewhere in the background. And we could probably do a Venn diagram, work out who that might be. Let's move on to Bayern Munich. So no Nicholas Jackson, it seems. They are still in the hunt for forward players. We know that because they're bidding for Ademola Lookman, among others. But they've already had one great success so far in the transfer window, in that Luis Diaz, A, has started well in the new league, and B, is taking some of the pressure off Harry Kane.
Yeah, and I think this is huge. Harry Kane talked about it himself when we were speaking to him a couple of weeks ago after the Super Cup. He was saying, hopefully Luis Diaz will turn up and get himself in that spot and score those goals. Because you look at all the good players, the good wide players that Bayern have had down the years, none of them are really regular goal scorers since the days of Arjen Robben. So I think for someone to be able to chip in like that, because he's more of a wide forward than a winger, isn't he? And of course, he's played a lot as centre forward for Liverpool, of course, and very successfully in the Champions League last season. Seeing as they weren't able to get Nick Woltemade, and by the way, we should add that Bayern and German football are profoundly shocked by this deal to take Woltemade to Newcastle. Like, Bayern just thought he was going to wait it out and they'd sign him next summer. And funnily enough, you look at the fact that Florian Wirtz and Nick Woltemade have basically said no to Bayern and yes to the Premier League. Bayern are like really, really shaken by that, actually. So
it's the Harry Kane transfer in reverse, doubled.
It is. I mean, I tend to think because in 2 of the last 3 windows they've been able to get Premier League starters, so they were able to get Kane, and then they were able to get a Diaz. If we're talking, like, Elise is great, of course, but they're able to take players away who were starting from elite Premier League teams or were wanted by elite Premier League teams. And they've been able to say to themselves, yeah, we're big dogs. We're big dogs at the table. And this summer has been quite a humbling experience for them, because you've had 2 players who said, well, you heard Florian Wirtz, he said, I wanted to take the less safe option and go and test myself at Liverpool. And now you've got Nick Woltemade going, I really wanted to go to Bayern, but I've got an opportunity to go to the Premier League and play in the Champions League and play in all these big fixtures for a massive club. I'm going to do that instead. Maybe that's the way I develop. Maybe that's the way I become Germany's number 9 at the World Cup next summer. And now, of course, German football is a little bit on the back foot and saying, well, what can we do? What can we do when these Premier League clubs come in with these absolutely monstrous sums? Because Bayern were willing to go nowhere near what Newcastle actually paid for Nick Woltemade.
Yeah, of course.
But maybe with the Jackson deal going through, maybe Luis Diaz ends up being the backup in the end to Kane.
But it's possible, I suppose. They've still got 24 hours, but everybody's got 24 hours and everyone's got to move fast. Thank you for reminding me about big dogs, der große Hund. Thank you very much indeed. Dortmund, well, the fact that they beat Union Berlin 3-0 is a fact. First win of the year for them. But more importantly, Joe Bellingham managed to get through a significant part of the game without his mum or dad getting on the pitch.
Yeah, I mean, they must have been tempted because there was a clash of heads in the first half and he had to get a little plaster above his eye. But he managed to get through it, improved performance. Look, it's a work in progress. And there's a reason he's got Job rather than Bellingham on the back of his shirt. It's because it's a big weight to carry. Sure. So the sooner he's allowed to get on with that, the better. Dortmund were much better, particularly second half today. They won 3-0 against Union Berlin. A couple for Seru Guirassy, who's the ultimate get-out for them. And funnily enough, when Bellingham came off, he was replaced by Felix Metscher, who's brother, of course, has just moved to the Premier League with Leeds. And Metscher scored the 3rd goal in that, a brilliant right foot shot. So Dortmund at least getting a bit of the monkey off their back. And this in the week where they tried to bring a bit of stability to the whole thing by extending the contract of Niko Kovac.
And, of course, they've made significant contribution to Chelsea's astonishing revolving door transfer policy, which is not in any way a criticism because they are champions of the world.
It's just reality, Danny. So obviously, Carney Chukwuemeka, they've worked out a deal that Dortmund feel is a palatable price. They always loved him as a player. They're a bit tentative because of the fitness thing. He came back and he came on as substitute. But the interesting one is Aaron Anselmino, the young Argentinian defender who signed hugely impressive starting today. Dortmund, are a bit stretched at the back at the moment. They've got the injury to Schlotterbeck. Niklas Süle's out as well. He came in, and having someone who can actually pass the ball out of defence, a right footer who can pass the ball out of defence, made a massive difference to them.
Okay, so let's do our stars of the week. I'm going to choose Andreas Huntungi. Lovely name. There's some very good names in this week's Trans-Europe Express. But Burnley fans will remember him. I think is he still owned by Burnley, Andy?
He is, yeah.
Because we know the rules. Nearly every player we mention in the next 2.5 hours is some way still owned by Premier League clubs. Well, he scored for San Paulo. He scored San Paulo's second goal against Hamburg, and that, of course, is the big Hamburg derby. But the derby, it was a home game for Hamburg, and San Paulo off to a fine start there. So he's my star of the week. Who is yours, Andy?
My star of the week is Jakub Kaminski. See, the bad news for Köln is they conceded their first goal of the season. The good news is they're 4-0 up already against Freiburg, which is remarkable. They played two of the good teams from last season in Mainz and Freiburg. They've won both of those games. So obviously Köln are already dreaming of Europe and all the rest of it. Kaminski, who couldn't score for Wolfsburg in either of the last two seasons, arrived at Köln, scored a banger to open the scoring today.
OK, we'll go to Italy next, where Juventus, everything is moving at all the time in Italian football. And we'll, of course, later on, we'll be reflecting with Daniele Fisichella on the news that Jamie Vardy is signing for Cremonese. Yes, you heard me right. Jamie Vardy is going to Cremonese. But next we'll talk about everything that's going on in Italy and perhaps another second, third, fourth, fifth chance at Juventus for Dusan Vlahovic. Yes, let's turn our attention now to use the phrase that I really am trying to train myself out of, Andy, to Italy. And a player who I thought in Dusan Vlahovic of Juventus, in the last year of his contract, not once at the club. He also wants out. But it may be that he's finding a way to stay, and it may be that Juventus will actually be happy about that.
Yeah, it's a really strange one because they've been doing everything to get rid of him, not just this window, but in previous windows as well, as it's become clear he wouldn't extend, mainly because they can't afford to pay his wages all over again. He's earned 12 million a year. They can't, not only can Juventus not go anywhere near that again, I don't think there are many clubs out there that are prepared to, because he was brilliant at Fiorentina. He's got an enviable goal-scoring record for Serbia. He started very well at Juventus, and it's never quite taken off there for a lot of reasons. Now, part of that, I think, is down to Juventus. They've not been great at developing players over the last couple of years. If you look at the amount of improvers there aren't a lot of them. And that's a knock on them. But Vlahovic has clearly got something to do with it as well. Now, the most likely move for him has always seemed like it would be Milan. He wouldn't earn anywhere near as much money there, but of course Max Allegri, who really likes him, is there, and they've been looking for a striker, at least one striker, even though they've brought in Christopher Nkunku. But the weird thing with Vlahovic, they've been offering everywhere, and everyone's saying no because he's not got anywhere near the value outside Italy that he has in. Is that he's scored important goals in both of the two games so far in Serie A, and he's looked really good when he's come on. He scored a clinching goal when they were under the pump against Parma last week when they were leading 1-0 to sew it up. Then the goal he scored against Genoa, it's the goal of a great centre-forward. Front post corner, brilliant header. And you're looking at him thinking, why don't you do this all the time? It's infuriating because we know how much he's got in him. And when he's been offered to, well, every club that might need a striker, he's offered to Newcastle last week. And you're thinking at his best, he would be an asset to any of these teams. There's no doubt about it. But because of his wages, at least partly because of his wages, Juventus are lumbered with him for the moment, it seems. And maybe it'll work out because maybe they'll get a good season out of him, and maybe at the end of this season, even if he can't get 12 million a year elsewhere, he can get a big signing on fee when he's out of contract.
Yeah, absolutely. Meanwhile, we want to talk about Napoli. They, of course, have had a lot of players brought in during the transfer window so far. They played against Cagliari. But, you know, new players, old players, new faces, ancient faces. Conte's team's going to Conte.
Oh, big time, Danny. And they're playing Cagliari in their first home game. And it was a slog. It was a real slog. And even with Kevin De Bruyne having a few little moments in the first half, it's not happening. They're 0-0 going into stoppage time. 5 minutes of stoppage time. In the third of those 5 minutes of stoppage time, a chance falls about 12 yards from goal to Scott McTominay. It's like, you've read the script, you know what's happening. And he puts it straight at the goalkeeper. And you're like, OK, well, it's really not happening today. But you think it's Conte team. You need to find a more unlikely goal scorer. That's how it works. So a minute or two after that, you get one chance for Andre Frank, Zambo Anguissa. And look, if McTominay was their best player last season, Zambo Anguissa wasn't far behind. He was absolutely brilliant. He's been sensational since he's gone to Serie A. He smashes in the winner. Everyone goes mad. Conte, of course, goes mad. That's part of the vibes. 2 games, 2 wins, no goals conceded so far. And happy days. Well, unless you actually watch the match.
Yeah, well, he won't care a jot about that, will he?
No.
I wanted to leave some space. That's why we've still got 4 or 5 minutes to go to talk about Milan. Now, we had the news in the last few seconds that Adrian Rabiot is on his way there. But it's a weird old week for them. They won their football match against Lecce. You'd expect that. But their transfer dealing, to the untrained eye, looks perhaps at best unstructured or at worst chaotic.
There's so much up in the air, Danny. And of course, you know, we go back to the move for Victor Boniface being cancelled because I don't know if he so much failed the medical, because I don't think there was anything that showed up that they didn't know already, that he'd had 2 ACL operations, but they got cold on it and they sent him back to Germany. It'd be interesting to see how Boniface's season turns out if he doesn't go to Saudi, which I suspect both he and Leverkusen are hoping for. But you look at the fact they're looking for a big, strong forward. And then they go and get themselves to the front of the queue for Christopher Nkunku, who Bayern are very interested in, of course. He bites, again, quite surprisingly. But Nkunku, at his best, we know is a fantastic player. But he's not Boniface. He's a very, very different type of striker. So we know they want two strikers. Maybe they would have fit together, who knows? But what they're looking for... Nkunku seems a bit out of left field, especially as they spent such a big amount of money on him for modern Milan. And then you look at what else they're trying to do. They have approached Roma with a potential deal for Artem Dovbyk, who doesn't really suit Gianpiero Gasperini, it's fair to say. They've offered Santiago Jimenez, who they bought in January. Remember, at great expense. And he was not very keen on the idea. Apparently he's got a little bit more keen on the idea since Tade, the sporting director of Milan, went on television and goes, we don't want him. We're really hoping to sell him before deadline day. Or we're really hoping to loan him out before deadline day, which makes Jimenez buy it. And now Roma are going, maybe that's not us. So, who knows what's going to happen on this final day. Rabiot, maybe they can get him over the line. And I think to have that balancing player like they did with Ismail Benacer when he was at his best, and, I think it's fair to say Rabiot's a cut above him, that could be a good thing for them. But, I mean, if I asked you or you asked me what the Milan team is going to be like for their next game after the international break, I think we would probably come up with two completely different 11s.
Yeah, we would. Our friend, of course, and often working colleague here and co-presenter, Daniele Fisichella, has jumped into our WhatsApp group. It's only open to the most select people. You the humble listeners, you can't be in it. Just to remind us that the first game after the international break, AC Milan played Bologna, or more pertinently, Adrien Rabiot plays against Jonathan Rowe, the two people who had the punch-up in the dressing room at Marseille during the first game of the season.
Yes.
The gods of football smile upon us, don't they, when they bring us stuff like that? Just brilliant. Thank you very much,
Gladiators, or it's a knockout. Let's see.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Daniele. So tell us who your star of the week in Italy is, Andy.
Mine is a first-time star of the week, Artur Atta of Udinese, young French midfielder, came over from Metz at the start of last season, hadn't scored a goal for Udinese until this evening when Udinese visited Inter. Inter took the lead early on, looked really silky, gave away a penalty, and then Atta scores the winner just after that from outside the penalty box to give Udinese a famous win at San Siro. It's a brilliant goal, curls it round Jan Sommer, and you think, what a first goal in Italy to score, a winner away at Inter.
Yeah, and of course it's only the first fortnight of the season, but Inter can't afford to be throwing away home points, with all due respect, like that. Very, very poor result for them, and deserved but for the winners. Mine is Matthias Solé. Came to Roma, actually a big money signing. Didn't look like it was going to work out for him. He hasn't been a regular starter or anything, but he scored the winner at Pisa yesterday. And I wonder whether I'm psychologically persuaded to have him as my star of the week. So just so I can mention the fact that he was an assist by Evan Ferguson, whose progress at Rome, as you know, I am watching with a jeweler's eyepiece. And if that isn't scrutiny enough, I'll replace it with a newly refurbished Hubble Space Telescope. No pressure, Ewan, Evan, and no pressure whatsoever. Next up, we'll be talking about France, where you might not, look, we expect PSG to win, but they're winning in a particular style now. And I think their result this weekend, well, obviously it sends reverberations through the French league, but those of you hoping to dethrone them as the champions of Europe may well want to watch their performance. We'll talk about that next. Yeah, as you were hearing there, tomorrow the transfer window slams shut at 7 p.m. Live into a deadline day special with Mr. Deadline himself, Jim White, our chief football correspondent, Alex Crook, and former Liverpool midfielder, Danny Murphy. So you can join Jim and Alex and Danny and a host of insiders and experts from 6:30 in the evening following a special deadline day drive show with Andy Goldstein and Darren Bent, analysing and dissecting all the last-minute deals. On deadline day, talkSPORT will give you the inside track on who your club are signing and keep you up to date with all the latest deals as they happen. Now, speaking of deals, after Aston Villa's 3-0 loss to Crystal Palace this evening, Villa manager Unai Emery has been speaking to talkSPORT's Joe Shannon, where he provided an update on the latest situation surrounding Emi Martinez.
The fans will obviously want to know what the situation with Emi Martinez is. He wasn't in the squad. Can you tell us why that was?
Tomorrow we'll see it. Because today he was not available to play because he was not focused 100% to play this match. Because he's involved in this transfer window, and tomorrow we'll see it, how we are finishing it. But of course I want of Emi, of one goalkeeper with a Bissot, the best goalkeeper possible, to include in the squad with Emi or without Emi.
He has had a fantastic time since being at the club. He's a World Cup winner. Is it absolutely vital that you keep him?
So you have to accept, because they are clubs, they are players, they are as well a lot of wishes in different directions. And of course, when they are leaving some players, we are joining some players as well. We have to be, this is the reason we are in football and we are in the transfer window as well involving. And with every player we had before, every player we have now, I am going to respect them as well, their wishes. We are going to respect as well the club. It's very important. And of course, we are going to try to get the better squad possible with the players we have and the players we can join us.
Yes, I wonder which clubs need a world-class World Cup winning goalkeeper. Oh, anybody in Manchester want to put their hand up? All right, Andy, let's move on to France then, where our headline is perfect PSG. That despite the fact they conceded 3 goals at Toulouse, but they did score 6 times. And they were 6-1 up at one stage as well. A performance... You know, they're going to, 99.9% they're going to win the French title. When you start to see them revving up early in the season like this, the prospects for all those who've got to play them in the Champions League, we'll talk about the draw for that a little later in the programme, is already starting to be, oh my goodness, look at them.
And Danny, look, I'd never been conceited enough to say that A, on this show last week, and B, on the On the Continent podcast, I might have said, well, they've been a bit boring first couple of games of the season, haven't they? You know, just sneaking 1-0 wins against inferior opposition, playing very within themselves, bit of pre-season for them. Well, this felt like the first game of the season because they were brilliant. They were so exciting. And Toulouse are a decent side as well. They went there and you just had the impression that every single person in the stadium was leaning forward in their seats. I think that the Joao Neves hat-trick is possibly the best hat-trick I've ever seen. I was working it out, and I thought it's definitely better than Rivaldo's hat-trick for Barcelona against Valencia, going back all those years. It's that good. So, 2 overhead kicks and 1 smashed in the top corner from 30 yards. Is extraordinary. And of course, bear in mind, you know, because of suspension, they missed him at the very start of the season. He ended up getting sent off the Club World Cup, of course, so not present for PSG at the Super Cup final, for example. And it turns out a little bit of rest does you the world good, doesn't it? Because he was fantastic. A couple of penalties for Ousmane Dembélé as well. Now, there's also a penalty for Toulouse that was saved twice from different takers by Lucas Chevalier, so he's settling in as well. He was told he'd moved off his line for the first one, though that didn't look particularly evident from the replay.
No.
But anyway, he saved the second one anyway from a different taker, so it didn't really matter. They eased up a little bit at the end, but they look brilliant.
That's part of the perfection for them, the new goalkeeper. And still we don't know where Donnarumma's going. And with Donnarumma and Martinez both floating about, as we heard there from Unai Emery, in 24 hours, what is it now? Less than 24 hours of the transfer window to go. There are two enormous goalkeepers there, both physically and within their stature within the game. Incredible. They should both be free at the moment, you know.
Yeah, and I think, Danny, the real question is, where are Martinez and Donnarumma by the end of tomorrow? Because we talked to Chetin earlier, and if we get Ederson going to Fenerbahce instead of Galatasaray, that really puts the cat amongst the pigeons. So you're going to have 11 days for, I guess, if one of those doesn't move tomorrow, if Martinez or Donnarumma doesn't move tomorrow, you presume that one of them end up at Galatasaray, right? Because they want to spend big on a replacement goalkeeper.
Yeah, but if Ederson does go, you could see both of them ending up in Manchester.
Yeah, true.
Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. You watched the game while we were doing the meeting before tonight's programme, Andy, between Lyon and Marseille. Tell us all about that, because, I mean, rather overshadowed, I think, by the rather sad features of George Mikutadze in the crowd and looking very, very unhappy. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, look, he was more happy than he was on Friday when he was driving away from the training ground. He'd just been told he was being sold to Villarreal. Now, remember, Mikutadze is Georgian international, but Lyon born, Lyon raised. Was in the academy until they told him at 14 that they didn't want him anymore. And he spoke about it in a TV interview about a week and a half ago, where he said that, you know, he held it together in the office, and then he got into the parking lot with his parents and just cried his eyes out. And then 10 years later, you see him, who was meant to be the successor to Lacazette. He got a text from Alex Lacazette on the first day of the season saying, like, it's yours now. I'm bequeathing it to you. Go ahead and make your own history. And that like idea lasted about 2 weeks because Lyon were desperate for the money. We know they've already got a third of the wage bill that they had last year, but then they had the offer from Villarreal. They weren't able to sell Malik Fofana, their most valuable asset, because he only wants to go to a Champions League club, and brilliant as he is, no Chelsea or Bayern or whatever want to buy him just yet, probably next year. So it was left to them shoving Mikutadze out the door and him crying in his car again. He was there tonight with Ryan Shirky. And I guess, like, it was interesting listening to his teammates after this game. And I should say, by the way, it was a 1-0 win for Lyon, which means they still haven't conceded a goal yet this season, which means they've got 3 wins out of 3, which means they're level on points with PSG at the top. Marseille have lost both their away games so far. They played a lot of this game with 10 men after CJ Egan-Riley was sent off. But it was interesting hearing the interview afterwards with someone who arrived at the same time, actually, as Mikutadze, and that was Moussa Niakhaté from Nottingham Forest. And he said, when I had a dreadful first game, when we both had a dreadful first game, we lost 3-0 at Rennes, I gave away a goal and he missed a penalty, and we sat there in the dressing room together and said that we're not going to leave this club until we win something. And he says, I know that, you know, he was forced to leave 10 years ago, and this would be absolutely breaking his heart to leave. But this is football.
Well, it's also the mess that certain owners have left poor old Lyon in.
Yeah.
Of course, so which makes their start to the season all the more outstanding.
One little word on that. One little further word on that, Danny. Tyler Morton, outstanding again. Outstanding.
Okay. My star of the week is Esteban Paul. Now, he, a couple of days ago, transfer window, of course, he left Angers for Rennes. He made his debut for Rennes this weekend against Angers. The rest, the gods of football looked after for us. Of course he scored against his old club just days after changing. It was a 1-1 draw in the end, which means I suppose everybody had honour satisfied. Who's your star of the week in France, Andy?
Well, now Mikutadze's gone, I need a new favourite player in Ligue 1, right? So it's going to be Ilan Kebal, lefty, who plays for Paris FC. They got their first win in the top flight. They came from a goal down, beat Metz 3-2. This is just yards from the Parc des Princes, remember, in the Stade Jean-Bouin. Jurgen Klopp was there today. He'd been in the club shop. He was wearing all his Paris FC gear. But 2 goals from Kebal, who scored at Marseille last week as well. I think he's going to be a superstar in this division. Kevin Trapp making his debut as well after coming back to France.
Yeah, great for Paris to get off the mark, and later on we'll tell you about Telstar. Remember, we talked about them back in the top division in the Netherlands for the first time in half a century. All I can say about them, they had the most extraordinary win, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. We'll have a quick break now, get some news and sports headlines for you when we come back. Loads to get through in the second hour of 3 of tonight's slightly later edition of Trans-Europe Express.
As Lewis Hamilton, now at Ferrari, dares to dream of a record 8th F1 world title, the Tifosi will be hoping the Brits can bring glory back to Italy. To many, Ferrari and Formula One are inseparable. They're the only team in the sport today to have competed in the first World Championship in 1950, are the most successful team in history, and have built some absolutely gorgeous cars. Their first driver's title was won in 1952 by Alberto Ascari. Considered one of F1's most dominant and best-loved champions, he drove the iconic Ferrari 500 and defended his title the year after. It was Juan Manuel Fangio in his Ferrari 250 who secured the team's next driver's title in 1956. Remember, he was world champion 5 times with 4 different teams. Mike Hawthorne, Phil Hill and John Surtees also won titles for Ferrari in the 50s and 60s, and the cars back then were beautiful, and they even sounded great, didn't they? Anyway, Ferrari went 11 years without winning a title until Niki Lauda won in 1975 in the iconic 312T. Throughout much of the 80s and 90s, though, Ferrari looked like they'd never go all the way again. The Professor Alain Prost came pretty close in 1990, but lost out to his bitter rival and former teammate at McLaren, Ayrton Senna. It was only when John Todt recruited a swathe of staff from outside of Italy, including Michael Schumacher, that the glory days returned 21 years after their last driver's title. The turn of the century saw the prancing horse sprint to an unprecedented 5 consecutive championship doubles. And after Schumacher left, Kimi Raikkonen reclaimed the driver's title immediately. But despite employing 1,500 people, the Iceman remains the last Ferrari world champion. So, 16 constructors' titles, 7 more than McLaren, and 15 drivers' titles, 4 more than, again, McLaren. Ferrari are truly Formula One's top team. Forza Ferrari.
Yeah, welcome back, one and all, to the second hour of 3 of tonight's slightly later edition of Trans Europe Express. During this hour, we'll take you across everything that's been happening in Spain. And also we'll be talking about the Champions League draw. Hard to talk about these days because the group is one big league, but some very interesting games in that first tranche of matches on the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Incredible matchups. Daniel Fisichella will also join us at about 1:45 to talk about Jamie Vardy's move to Cremonese. So lots to get through, including, and it's now time for this.
Carrière, le Paris Saint-Germain, Mbappé! Mbappé! Little give and go, Mbappe's in! Oh, shoots out! He scored twice in 2 minutes! Tête de qui Mbappé? Allez, qui vient!
Andy, I swore I'd stop doing chair dancing now that we're in vision and people are watching it on the smart TVs and YouTube, because I looked like Donald Trump's terrible dancing. So I've changed my dancing completely there for the flamenco theme to Mbappe watch, but now I look like a puppet from Thunderbirds. One for the teenagers there. I now look like I've got strings. I've really got to sort this out. It is Mbappe watch, and I suppose the first thing we should say that Real Madrid beat Mallorca at the weekend and came from behind to do so.
Yeah, they did, but it wasn't Kylian Mbappe who got them on the way. As you said, he had a goal ruled out for offside before Vedat Muriqi, favourite of Trans Europe Express, of course, opened the scoring at the Bernabeu with his first goal of the season. Arda Güler and Vinicius Junior pulled it around before half-time. Another goal disallowed afterwards for Mbappe, which was a much clearer offside. The first one was very close. It was a great pass through by Trent Alexander-Arnold, the sort that you imagine he will deliver to Kylian Mbappe a lot this season.
Yeah, he can't play for England with that kind of range. No way.
No way. Well, I guess he hasn't got Mbappe to aim for. I guess is Thomas Tuchel's argument.
Oh, that's right. He said he's got some terrible players up front for England to aim for. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. It's interesting, though, because with Jose Mourinho being sacked, as Jetin was talking us through earlier, Mbappe's obviously thought, you know what, I think football's missing a big conspiracy theorist at the moment. So he put out an Instagram of the little picture of him being flagged offside for the first one to say, or is it offside? Because, you know, that's exactly what the world needs, isn't it? A player getting involved with one of those, or maybe it was his social media team. But either way, horrible look.
Andy, listen, I make no apologies for breaking up our conversations tonight with all the latest transfer news that's breaking. Why wouldn't we? talkSPORT will be the best place to be tomorrow. Jim White from 6 o'clock in the evening, or 6:30 rather, with all the latest as the transfer window does close. This is an interesting one here, Andy. I watched today's Old Firm derby in horror, and we'll talk about Rangers and Celtic a little later in the programme. The standard of the derby was just appalling. Now, sometimes you get games where two teams cancel each other out. There was nothing to cancel out today. It was just an awful, awful game. But news tonight that Rangers are already trying to bed in about 8 new players, aren't they? I think in total 12 at the club. Derek Cornelius, who actually played tonight for Marseille, is going to be loaned to Rangers, according to reliable sources in France. I'm going to put that out there because Rangers are a huge club, and he did play for Marseille tonight.
Yeah, and they're going to be one of the busiest clubs, Marseille, on deadline day. We talked about Milan earlier. Marseille have got a lot of plates spinning. Pablo Longoria, the president, was looking at his phone a lot during the game tonight.
Okay, and not playing Candy Crush, one assumes.
Definitely not.
No. The thing about Mbappe and Real Madrid is that they now find themselves in a situation where they've got 3 of the best forwards in the world. They always do, of course, but they're not certain what they're going to do with them, either in the short or medium term. Once Rodrigo, it's decided that he's not going, and I think they would probably have looked for a good home and a massive fee for him this summer, it's thrown a lot of pigeons, cats, pigeons, whatever get thrown into these stories. Because what are they going to do about Vinicius now?
It is an issue because they're still a long way apart on a new contract. Now, look, we can say from our aesthetic perspective that Rodrigo is a great fit for Real Madrid because he's very much a Xabi Alonso type of player, etc. He's versatile. You don't want to sell your best players, all that sort of stuff. The fact is he's not of the same sort of star level, rightly or wrongly, as either Mbappe or Vini Jr. And they could have made a lot of money for him, or at least that was their hope, Real Madrid. But it appears the money's not really out there at the sort of level that they want for Rodrigo. So they're not prepared to treat him like a star, but they want to sell him like a star, basically. So that leaves them with this Vinicius problem. Now, of course, part of it might be sort of changing that balance. We talked about the Saudi bogeyman before, which I think is less effective as time goes by when it becomes clear you don't really want to go there, because if you did, you would have done it already. I think it's interesting that the reports that have come out in Spain this week, that Real Madrid are at the point now where they're quite happy to just stop negotiating with Vinny, at least for this season. And they're kind of saying, in that respect, run your contract down. And they've done it with other players before, haven't they? They've let players go into the last year of their contract before re-signing them. That happened with Xabi Alonso. That happened with Mesut Ozil, Angel Di Maria. And I think it's quite interesting because Florentino Perez's whole argument is, where would you go that's better than here? And honestly, it's quite a convincing argument, isn't it? So I guess if you're saying to Vinicius Junior, look, if money's the most important thing for you, we can't do that for you. And funnily enough, that's kind of the position that PSG are taking at the moment in their new era. We're the best team in the world. We may not be the biggest club in the world, but, we are not prepared to pay insane wages anymore, but you can play for the best team in the world. So do you want that or do you not want that?
It is interesting. It is interesting that the manager, Xavi, went through exactly this in his time at Real Madrid. I remember it well. It's absolutely fascinating because, the owners, he can say to the owners, look, this is how human beings think about this club. It really is a huge thing, though, to have one of the arguably best 3 players in the world on the books and to not nail him down, to use an unfortunate expression, seems, even for Real Madrid, even for professional football in 2025, that does seem like how can I put it, Andy? It's
massively risky.
It's a gamble. Yeah. It's a huge gamble. You mentioned Trent Alexander-Arnold there. I think if that goal that Mbappe had disallowed had been marginally onside rather than marginally offside, we'd be talking about the 70-yard pass, that's what it was, by Trent Alexander, that we're all kind of blasé about, watch him every week in the Premier League. But we'd have been talking about that as the moment when he arrived as a Real Madrid player. But it's been a much more difficult week for him. He didn't play both the games for Real Madrid. And I'm going to say it, Thomas Tuchel, I think, is, football terms, not humanity, he's borderline bonkers, isn't he? Some of the things he does and some of the decisions he makes. Why has he left Trent Alexander-Arnold out of the England squad?
Especially instead picking Reece James instead. I love Reece James. He's one of my favourite players.
Absolutely, but he's brittle, isn't he?
Yeah, you can't bank on him. You'd be mad to bank on him because of his fitness record, which is such a shame, obviously, but it is reality. Trent Alexander-Arnold, you kind of hoped he'd be past that once Gareth Southgate wasn't there anymore, because clearly Gareth Southgate had his doubts over him. But it seems that's held over. Look, I think we have to hold judgment, reserve judgment on what Tuchel's doing and the way he's approaching this, because, of course, Trent Alexander-Arnold's only just got there. Maybe he thinks it's better for him to bed in. And, of course, there was all this fuss this week about, well, maybe Trent Alexander-Arnold might want to go somewhere because he didn't get picked for the second game at Oviedo, which we predicted, by the way, the week before, because we said, well, really, they kind of need to protect him and they need to play Dani Carvajal, who's a very different style of right-back, who's going to want to play because he wants to play for Spain at the World Cup next summer. So I think there will be a bit of job share in there as well. And I think for games in which you need to defend a bit more, certainly in the short term, I think Carvajal is a sensible option. And I think it's a sensible option for Alexander-Arnold to give him that break as well. I guess I'm really interested to see how he develops as a defender. Like you said, the passes, we know he can do that. We know the vision he's got. We know the athleticism he has. But funnily enough, I thought about this when I was watching Liverpool at St James's Park at first hand on Monday. If you're the right back for Liverpool, you don't really get that much cover, do you? So I think when you've got a midfield with Federico Valverde, depending which exact position he takes up, if you've got just a little bit more protection, does that make him look a better defender? That's my question. Also, the other question is, does Alonso go back to what he did at Leverkusen, play with three at the back, and does Alexander-Arnold have to completely reimagine his game? Because, of course, part of his attacking punch is because he's got that range of passing, he doesn't have to go past the fullback. He can play the early pass, a little bit like a sort of turbo David Beckham, really. So if he's advanced further up the pitch, does he need to change the way he plays? And certainly they've got a very attacking fullback on the other side as well. And, I think the idea is, I think they'll play with the four. I think Alexander-Arnold bursts forward. I think Carreras bursts forward. Brilliant goal line clearance by him to prevent a Mallorca equaliser yesterday. And then you have Tchouaméni dropping back in, a bit like Busquets used to for Barcelona, and making a three at the back that way. So you start with a four and you end up with a three when you're attacking. So there's a load of questions for Trent Alexander-Arnold, and they don't all need to be answered now. If Tuchel wants to give him a little bit of time to develop and wait and see, I think that's fine. And, if you look at the games that England are playing, are we really learning anything massive from those games? It's a question, isn't it?
And I guess, you're hinting there that Alexander-Arnold could operate in front of a three, play, what used to be called wing back, but let's just say, in the midfield in a 3-4-3 or something. The problem with that is I can't see how England do that, with all due respect to the players they've picked. They don't have three good enough centre-backs. That is the weakness in England's team. It looks like, to me at least, is the England. A note, because I'm always watching these odds. I don't bet. I'm interested in odds, though. England with the local bookmakers are still favourites for the World Cup, and I keep thinking, not with that back four, you're not. But that's that's maybe me.
But like I said, the likelihood at this moment is really that Real Madrid play with a four rather than a three. Which, and if he is in a position where he shows that he can defend better over the course, partly through learning from Carvajal and partly through having a little bit more cover, then it's a definite bonus for England. And maybe that requires a bit of a rethink in a couple of months.
Yeah, I rang the bookmaker and said, can I bet on a team with England's forward players and the Netherlands' rear guard? Because that's what would win the World Cup. Yeah, Andy Brassell and me, Danny Kelly, taking you into the wee small hours here on Trans Europe Express. And Andy, we're going to talk about Spain next. And, well, Barcelona still messing about, trying to convince people about the start dates at the new stadium, the new refurbished, and what I assume will be absolutely amazing to look at, Camp Nou. But first of all, on the pitch, they've dropped a couple of points this evening.
Yeah, they have. They drew 1-1 at Rayo Vallecano, so took the lead through a first-half penalty, won and scored by the man Lamine Yamal. And then in the second half, comeback by Rayo, of course, made sure they were in Europe in the Conference League after a couple of near misses this week. And Fran Perez scored at the back post for them. Really great finish. And they deserved their draw in the end, I thought. Marcus Rashford came on for the last half hour, a little bit quiet after he came on for Rafinha. And I guess he's sort of adapting to his role at the moment. It'll take time. And Xabi Alonso was talking about it yesterday, actually. We were just talking about Real Madrid, how infuriating it is for coaches, as it is every year, that just at this point where they've played a couple of matches and they've started working with their teams, all their players are going to disappear for 10 days, which is not ideal, and there's not a coach in the game that likes that, and Hansi Flick will be pretty perturbed by that as well. But I think one of the big questions for Barcelona this week exactly is Camp Nou, when? As you say, because there was some footage leaked this week of Joan Laporta in the new Camp Nou, which looked really great, actually, despite the fact it's not finished.
I'm sure it's going to be wonderful,
when it opens, we know at stage one it's only going to hold 27,000 people. They're just keen to get in there as soon as possible, even at this vastly reduced capacity, so they can get the corporate facilities open, and so they can stop paying rent on Montjuic, which they kind of have in their back pocket as a bit of a backup. Now, remember, we're looking forward to the 13th, 14th of September, when they've got a home game against Valencia, to see where that is. They're very much hoping, they're talking to UEFA at the moment to see what they can do, because obviously UEFA don't like teams to move mid-league stage or mid-group stage as was. So if they started the league stage away from Camp Nou, that they won't be playing in it for the league stage. So as is scheduled, October 1st, which is when they would be at home to PSG, which would be one heck of a gala opening, by the way. That would be an extraordinary opening for the new, even mini as it stands, Camp Nou. We've just got to the end of stage one of 3 stages of construction. That would be something. But as stands, they've got none of the permits, none of the permissions, any of that.
Okay. And you say the managers will be distraught by having to lose their players for a week now or a week and a bit because of the international break. But the traditionally distraught manager of Atletico Madrid will have that added to the fact that they've still not won the league after 3 matches. Yeah, and to have his youngest son saying for us to get 2 points from 9 games is absolutely unacceptable. I mean, talk about chip off the old block there. Yeah. Giuliano Simeone scored the opener actually yesterday at Alaves, which is an interesting story in itself, because that was the place really where his first team career took off. He played as a winger rather than a striker there, which kind of morphed him into his current role as a sort of wide player / wing back. And so he didn't celebrate when he scored. And it was one of those rare occasions where he thought, yeah, fair enough, actually. I know where you're coming from with this. But having scored another early goal, they again gave up a really daft goal, a penalty conceded when Alexander Sorloth knocked someone over in his own area. And when strikers giving away penalties is always infuriating anyway. And it's particularly infuriating for Atletico because they've dominated each of their 3 opening games, which from a distance, I think looked like gimmies, really. You know, they're away to Espanyol, then home to promoted Elche, and then away to Alaves. And, you know, I know people can say Mendiroza is a difficult place to go, but come on. This is a team that has, or a club that has spent more money on players than any other team outside the Premier League. And so, and they're not finished yet. It looks like they're getting Nico Gonzalez from Juventus tomorrow. They wanted an extra wide player. There was speculation earlier in the week that it would be Yannick Ferreira Carrasco for a 3rd time, which they slapped down pretty quickly. But you look at that and you think,
Well, maybe that's why it's had a bit of trouble gluing together. But of course, then, as you say, it's the last thing that they want, all the players going off elsewhere. And, at the moment, there are a lot of changes, not a lot of stability, and not a lot of ability to weather the difficult periods of a game. Because, as we said, not only are those 3 games they easily should have won with their resources, but also with the way the games actually went, they still had the opportunities to win them, and they've not managed to do it. All Diego Simeone would say tonight is, look, if I start thinking about the different distance, point-wise, between my team and the rest of the teams, it means I'm forgetting my own team. So we just need to concentrate on us for the moment. And Jan Oblak echoed that.
Yeah, I was just laughing there when you mentioned it, of the prospect of, so Yannick Carrasco, you're a good player. Fancy a third go under Simeone? No, I think I'll let that pass if you don't mind. Meanwhile, in the looking terrible derby, Seville won at Girona.
Yeah, they did. And look, it's all falling to bits, really, at Girona. Bottom. They've got some work to do on deadline day. That's as fair to say. But look, I mean, it's been awful for them. After they lost 5-0 at Villarreal last week, Michel, the coach, he kind of flipped out, and he said in the press conference afterwards, honestly, when we were 4-0 down at the half-time, I didn't know what to say to them. They give me that sort of performance, I really don't know what to say. And he looked a bit lost and at the end of it all. And then they play Sevilla, who are a team that are in the worst financial situation you can possibly imagine, really. Of the 3 new players they'd signed, they couldn't register any of them until like 2/3 of the way through this week, when they managed to get Gabriel Suazo and Alfon on the books. Poor old Odysseas Vlachodimos is still waiting for his registration, the unluckiest goalkeeper in football. But Sevilla did go there yesterday. Alfon, having just been registered after that move from Celta, played really well, and he scored the opening goal as well, and Isak scored the second. So a win that they desperately needed. It's weird to say 3 games into the season, but like losing that felt like the end of something for Girona. They need to be busy tomorrow. Yeah,
and the link with Manchester City doesn't seem to extend to actually rescuing them from the situation they're in. My star of the week, Andy, is another reflection that there is so much transfer activity in modern football, and loans that you almost when we talked about this, I had to try and remember Arnaud Danjuma in a Spurs shirt.
It really happened.
He did score a goal too. I think it was an FA Cup tie. Someone will put me right about that. I'm also beginning to... No, he played for Everton as well, didn't he? But Arnaud scored the second as Valencia beat Getafe by 3-0. Getafe had previously looked pretty good, but it was Valencia's first win of the season, and Danjuma was central to that. He's my star of the week. Who is yours?
You're looking for a Premier League cast-off from me, aren't you? And I'm not going to let you down. Look, Leander Dendoncker has already made a massive impact at Oviedo. They played Real Sociedad yesterday. They were under the pump, particularly in the first half. But then Dendoncker, who I suspect a lot of people is slipped their notice that he's ended up there, scored a brilliant right-foot goal from just inside the box to give them their first win back in the top flight after 24 years.
Fantastic. We'll be talking about another team with their first win in the top flight in another country for nearly half a century, a little later in tonight's edition of Trans-Europe Express, which will take you through till 1 o'clock in the morning. But next, we're going to try and unravel... It's much more difficult to do now. There is no group stages. The draw for the Champions League. What we do know we've got is an extraordinary raft of fixtures in the first week. Andy will take you through those in just a few seconds' time here on the mighty, mighty talkSPORT. Yeah, our biggest competition to date is now live, and we're giving you a chance to win Oasis tickets plus a whopping 25 grand. Two lucky winners, not one, but two, will go win a pair of Oasis tickets when they return to Wembley on the 27th of September. Plus, that's not all. Alongside the tickets, we're giving you a chance to win a whopping £25,000. For all the details on how to enter this amazing competition, listen up right now.
18 plus, UK excluding Northern Ireland. For a chance to win, text the word Oasis to 83338 and you're in the draw. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You must have the bill payer's permission. Or you can enter for free by calling 0330 880 338. All entries must be received by the 19th of September at 9 a.m. This is a talkSPORT limited promotion run on talkSPORT, Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
So, Andy, we turn now to the Champions League draw. Different because we're now into this new format where you don't have groups of death and all the rest of it. I have to say I watched the whole thing with a stony heart. It went on and on and on. And when Reshmin, bless her, former colleague of mine here at talkSPORT, said, I've been doing this for 7 years, I thought she was talking about that actual draw. During the week. It went on and on and on and on. When really all it wanted was for Qatar to keep pressing that button ever faster. We could have had all these fixtures out. As it happens, let's just talk briefly about some of the English teams in there, because there are no Scottish teams to talk about. More about that in a second. The national broadcaster did a list of teams who had a favourable draw. And among those, Spurs have, judging by the coefficients of their opponents, the 8th easiest draw of all the teams in the league. Arsenal even easier, 6th easiest of those. I will say as well that Spurs, if they get their act together, not that performance against Bournemouth, thank you very much, their 4 on paper easiest games are the first 4 they will play. So I'm going to say this, and obviously you'll be able to shoot me down when we get round to it. So they could be going to Paris, to Saint-Germain, for the 5th game of the thing with a whole load of points already stacked up, which would be just great. The English team who I think will not be happy with their draw, obviously, you want to play some big teams, but Newcastle have got a horrible looking schedule, Andy.
It depends which way you look at it, doesn't it? Because Newcastle, even though this is their second season out of 3 being in the Champions League,
yeah,
they are not a Champions League perennial yet. They are hoping to become one. They are aiming to become one. So I sense from speaking to people that there's still a sense of excitement. Like, we are playing Barcelona on the first weekend. There are some great away trips. We can go to Brussels, we can go to Düsseldorf and go to Leverkusen away, all that sort of stuff. Marseille away, and we can talk about like other ties involving English teams with historical resonance a bit more later on. I think. I mean, it made me think straight away of Didier Drogba in 2004 when I saw Marseille against Newcastle come out of the hat, and I just think, like with what they've got, it's difficult. But I think all of these Premier League teams should be going through. All 6 of them should be going through, because I think probably the 24 is more realistic than the 8 for Newcastle. But you're looking through it and you think they should be able to get to 10 points. I think that is the way you've got to look at it this year, because last year, I think what made it so exciting, even though a lot of people initially struggled with the new format, is the fact that none of the clubs, be it the biggest clubs or the smallest clubs, really knew what the level was. Like we always talk in the Premier League about 40 points to stay up, or more latterly 25 or whatever it is now. I don't know. Yeah. But I think, like, now we know that 10 should probably do you for top 24.
16 for the top 8, yeah.
Yeah, 15, 16 for top 8.
That is a hell of an ask, by the way, to get 15 or 16 points, but there,
Yeah, but I think for those, as you say, Danny, and as you were saying for Spurs, for those biggest clubs or the clubs with favourable fixtures, you're looking at that and thinking, how quickly can we trouser these points and then rest some people. I'd be interested to see how many of these big teams go hell for leather from the off, because you don't want to be left in that position of PSG, because remember, they nearly went out in the league stage, of a Manchester City, of a Real Madrid, of any of those ones who are hovering over the sinkhole coming to like match day 7 or match day 8.
Listen, Andy, you mentioned already that Newcastle's that the first round of fixtures, for people who don't remember, because the Europa League starts a little later, there's games on Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday. Now, I don't know whether this is UEFA's computer or the hand of human people wanting to ensure massive TV audiences for these games, but the matchups in that first 3-day round of games are extraordinary. You already mentioned Barcelona going to what will be a cauldron at St James's Park. Liverpool will take on Atletico Madrid, and we'll see whether Atletico can pick up the form they showed at the start of the season to try and resist Liverpool. Dortmund go to Juventus. Real Madrid are at home to Marseille. This one, of course, absolutely catches my eye. Chelsea go to Bayern Munich, and you've got two perennial late stages of the Champions League teams. They're meeting each other on day one.
Yeah, it's huge. And of course, you think of the 2012 final as well. Look, Chelsea will be ambitious for this Champions League, but I'm really interested to see how Chelsea, just like I am with Marseille, who didn't have any European football of any description last season, how they cope with a different rhythm. Because if you think of Maresca, who's got a particular philosophy of play, and De Zerbi, who's got a particular philosophy of play, arriving and having this one-off situation at a club of that size. With De Zerbi, you have no European football, and with Maresca, you do have European football, but you have European football that you can leave some of your best players out of for the first half of the season, where you can get all of the squad involved, where you can keep more players than you normally could happy. So if you think of the increased competition, the increased rhythm, the increased demands on the players, the fact that you can't really have two separate squads for it, as Chelsea almost did for the League and the Conference League, which was a one-off, how do they deal with that? And Chelsea are going to be asked that question very, very early on. Because, look, it's interesting. I suppose you could argue, depending on what happens tomorrow, it's not the biggest Bayern squad we've ever seen. You know, Harry Kane's come out and said that publicly. And Harry Kane, a bit like LeBron James, bear with me for a second, he's someone who comes out and he is aware of the weight of every word that leaves his mouth. Totally. Harry Kane never says anything for the sake of it, ever. So when he came out 2 weeks ago now and said, well, it's a bit thin, if we're being honest, he's saying, come on, show me what you've got. You know, go out there and do something. And that's why Max Eberl, the sporting director, went cap in hand to the board last week and said, well, I know you said we've only got a loan left, but can we do something a bit more? And that's why they end up like offering to pay like what would have been a record loan fee for Nicholas Jackson.
Yeah, I mean, the injury to Jamal Musiala completely threw their preparations out. And you can understand it. He's been so critical to what they do. Harry gets the goals, but Musiala is the sort of flywheel, I think is the phrase I use, from chronology, from expensive watches. He's the flywheel of the team. And the loss of him has left them looking at alternatives, shall we say, no more than that. I love the fact that Arsenal are going to Bilbao in this first lot of games. Of course, North London clubs have done very well in Bilbao in recent months, Andy, you may remember. And the other one, I mean, Antonio Conte will not... He will find some reason why it's a conspiracy that Napoli have to go to Manchester City in the first week. But equally, with City's... How can you call City's form over the past 12 months patchy? Let's call it patchy for the sake, you know, because we know there's a great manager, there's a great team in there somewhere. But Conte will think he's got a chance when they go to East Manchester.
They absolutely will, especially at this stage of the season while they're still betting in. And I'm not just saying that because of recent results in the Premier League. But I guess you just look at Manchester City and you think, if you're looking at the real contenders of this competition, are they in it yet? No. I don't know. I'd rather have Napoli in my expanded group of possibles than Manchester City at the moment. Not because I don't think there's talent on the staff at Manchester City, not because I don't think they've got an amazing coach, but they've changed an awful lot in a very short space of time.
The return of Rodri is absolutely critical to see where they really are. But it didn't win with him this weekend. What I would say, Andy, if I'm trying to be clever, is that looking at the runners and riders here, Manchester City can beat anyone in this tournament, but they can't beat everyone in this tournament.
Yeah,
Sooner or later, their limitations will be exposed.
I think that's fair to say. And I think what makes Napoli interesting, despite the absence of Romelu Lukaku, is the fact that they've got an extremely strong midfield. And if you look at teams that tend to do very well in the Champions League, they have great midfields. I mean, really, PSG sorting out their midfield. We talked about how great they've become off the ball, but their midfield really was what lifted them up a little bit last season. I think you look at the form of Fabian Ruiz, the form of João Neves, absolutely integral to what they were able to do last season. And then you look at Napoli, you look at Lobotka, Anguissa, De Bruyne, McTominay. You've got so many players in there who
proper footballers,
who've got so many ways of winning a game. So we already spoke about Napoli earlier in the show. The fact that they don't necessarily have to play well to win, especially not with those guys.
Yeah, of course, there's been a huge change from Paris Saint-Germain having a absolutely functional, physical, brilliant midfield, where the previous teams had had no midfield at all because they didn't think it was necessary. I'm afraid it is necessary. Now, we've been talking about transfers all evening, people coming and going, Adrian Rabiot going to Milan, but perhaps the most eyebrow-raising transfer rumour of the last 24 hours, and it's now not a rumour, it's confirmed, looks like it's going to go through, is that Cremonese in Italy will be having a new centre-forward in the legendary, Premier League legendary shape of Jamie Vardy. Daniele Fisichella will join us soon to talk about what on paper looks like an astonishing move. Yeah, the big story breaking, well, for us in the Premier League is that Jamie Vardy, a Premier League legend, nothing less than that. And, you know, he has been on the borderline, been a great player for the best part of 15 years, is now on his way to Cremonese in Italy. To find out more about Cremonese and this deal, I'm delighted to say we're joined, as I said, by our friend and colleague here on Trans Europe Express, Daniele Fisichella. Good evening, Danny.
Good evening, Danny, and good evening, Andy.
Hello.
Before we get stuck into Jamie Vardy, and I hope I'm not throwing you under the bus here, news breaking, I think, Daniele, that the Kolo Muani deal to Juventus appears now to be off.
Precisely. In the end, Juventus had reached an agreement with the player, but the negotiation with PSG broke down simply because PSG were asking for an amount of money that Juventus were not prepared to pay, in the region of 65 million euros. Juventus were hoping for a better deal. So the news is that now Juventus are thinking about another striker, probably Lois Openda, who plays for RB Leipzig, perhaps a loan with an option to buy. But the other certainty is that for sure they are very keen on keeping Dusan Vlahovic, who tonight scored another goal and gave them the winner.
Andy, very quickly, where does this leave Randall Kolo Muani? Because not wanted at Paris Saint-Germain, but only less than 24 hours now. I mean, I'm trying to work out the maths here. Probably 18 hours left of the transfer window.
Yeah, look, if his agent has got two phones, he probably needs a third tomorrow morning, I would say, because Kolo Muani can't get stuck there. Luis Enrique isn't going to pick him.
He's too good a player as well.
He's such a good player. He would suit a number of Premier League teams. Obviously, it doesn't look as if Chelsea are an option with Guy coming back, with Nicholas Jackson perhaps not going as well, or we'll see if that's a final position. I would love to see him in the Premier League.
I couldn't agree more. So Daniele, Jamie Vardy, still a really good player last year for Leicester, albeit in a poor side in the Premier League. It looks like he's going to Cremonese. I'm absolutely flabbergasted because I don't know much about Cremonese. Tell us about this deal.
He's landed already in Milan, and there were dozens of Cremonese fans waiting for him outside the airport. He's already signed some autographs. He has already signed some shirts. Even some Leicester City shirts were there. And one of the fans that was waiting for him had a Vardy tattoo on his calf that, of course, he got his signed. So the Vardy mania, the Vardy party has already started in Italy, and he hasn't even kicked a ball. The deal is in place until June 2026, plus an option of one other season, of course, if Cremonese survives the Serie A. It is a name that's been linked with other Italian clubs during the summer. Also Napoli, perhaps, were interested in him. But in the end, he goes to the newly promoted club, who, by the way, have had a fantastic start of the season, 6 points from 6, an historic win in Milan against AC Milan, one at the weekend as well. And the Italian media are absolutely excited for what is being presented like the working class hero of English football. I'm telling you what, in the WhatsApp group of Fantasy League with my friends and others, there is only one name that goes through, and it's Jamie Vardy. Everyone wants Jamie Vardy on the Italian Fantasy League.
But I think it's so interesting, isn't it, when you look at it, Daniele, the fact that strikers now in their 30s have a run of the game that they never did in European football. I think you could argue it starts with Aritz Adodis and Antonio Di Natale, and it sort of developed from there. Even Cristiano Ronaldo scored far more goals in his 30s than he scored in his 20s.
The list goes on and on and on and on now, doesn't it?
Exactly. But Vardy, I think the fact that he's joining a promoted club when he's always been about representing the underdog, it feels like a beautiful fit, doesn't it, Daniele?
Absolutely, and a beautiful challenge for him. It also means that it's not about the money, it's about keeping playing football and finding a new challenge. And of course, let's see how he adapts after all his career, all his lifetime spent in England. But the story fits perfectly with the profile of Cremonese and with the profile of the manager of Cremonese, Davide Nicola, whose football, I think, is not too different from the one of Claudio Ranieri, which, of course, won the title with Vardy at Leicester. So he joins a team that is very organized, but that plays quick and vertical football. That sounds like Vardy. A low block, of course, a team that obviously is going to play on the counter-attack. And I think, nothing too different from what Jamie Vardy has been used to do at Leicester. It is a team that, as I said, started the season very well, and has got a very experienced manager in Davide Nicola. He's considered a salvation specialist because anywhere he goes, he managed to save even the smallest clubs, from Crotone to Empoli to Salernitana. So he's a bit of a magician, really. And of course, Nicola, the manager of Cremonese, said Vardy is a player that has shown great quality, and what Cremonese asks of Vardy is simply scoring goals. He will need to be clinical. Cremonese will not have a lot of the ball, but he's always been clinical in his career. And this is a serious club, a solid club with a good owner, an Italian owner since 2007. So it's not a marketing operation. It's not a PR operation. Cremonese this summer have signed 14 new players, and they did need a new striker, of course. But I think Vardy is going to find competition as well, because at Cremonese there are good centre forwards. Antonio Sanabria, Federico Bonazzoli, who scored a fantastical bicycle kick against Milan, David Okereke, De Luca. So there is competition for places there. So I think it will be a good challenge, but credit to him for taking it on.
Absolutely, and if he sits on the bench sometimes, what a great player to bring on when players are tiring. He's an absolute nuisance, of course. Yep. Apart from being a really brilliant finisher, he's an absolute nuisance to centre backs. Just to fill in some blanks in my ignorance, please, Daniele. What colours do Cremonese play in, and how big is the stadium in Cremona?
The colours are the fantastic red and grey, so it's a unique shirt.
Wow.
Cremonese, by the way, winner of the Anglo-Italian Cup in 1994 at Wembley. So
who did they beat in the final?
I think Derby County, but the memory escapes me. It could have been Derby County. 93-94, by the way. 3-1 was the final, I don't remember. It was the first team where Gianluca Vialli started. Gianluca Vialli was from Cremona, and he started playing. Cremonese, the stadium Giovanni Zini is not huge. We are looking at around 20,000 people. By the way, Cremonese's first game after the international break is at Verona on the 15th of September, but probably the date that we want to circle in our calendar is the 23rd of November, when Cremonese welcomes Roma. And of course, Claudio Ranieri now sits on the board at Roma. But a little bit of folklore for Cremonese as well. We haven't mentioned the fact that for them plays Romano Floriani Mussolini. You heard it right. Mussolini is the great-grandson of Benito Mussolini, who, by the way, yesterday made his Serie A debut and changed the match completely. He was the winner for Cremonese because he earned the winning penalty for them. The boy is 20, plays football really well, and it also showed to be quite sensible because in his shirt he always got his first name, which is Romano, just to avoid any stupidity from the fans. But Jamie Vardy to score a goal in Serie A, assisted by the great grandson of a second war dictator, I think that's a nice movie for you to make.
Absolutely, it is, and it's the reason why Trans Europe Express is entering its 10th season, because these stories just keep on coming. Thank you very much, Daniele Fisichella there with all the latest. Who knew that Italian dictators would get a mention this week on Trans Europe Express? But that's why we love the show so much. Still an hour to go. Tim Vickery from Brazil will be next.